And there we are. We are live. David Krayden, what is going on?
Well, I had a heck of an interesting day because I was under the impression that this was going to be the day that Tamara Leach and Chris Barber were sentenced because I've been following this Freedom Convoy trial for almost 2 years. And I kid you not, this goes back to the Tuesday after the Labor Day weekend two years ago when this trial opened. A mischief trial, mind you. It's never been anything more than a mischief trial. That's all these people have ever been accused of, and then a month or so ago, convicted of. And there's actually concern now that the Crown is going to win their case on getting Tamara Leach 7 years in prison and Chris Barber 8 years in prison.
Crazy. That's
And
insane.
it's insane because we
That's
know we
insane.
have a revolving door here with prisons. Rapists are getting out, killers are getting out, car thieves are getting out, and they're getting bail, and people never see them again. And these two people, as far as I'm concerned, are Canadian heroes. And
100%.
I've made no bones about that from day one about this.
Mm.
I have a definite opinion about this. I think this is political persecution. I try to at least give a little bit of time to the Crown, but that's usually just to show people how stupid the Crown has been throughout this whole process. This is about lawfare, keeping these people tied to the court system for almost 2 years, running back and forth from Western Canada to Ottawa, going through this horrible process. It's not just the money that they've gone through, it's the humiliation at times,
Hmm.
and it's the constant harassment that they're getting. And when I heard this week that there's a Crown was actually considering putting peaceful protesters in jail for 7 to 8 years, I thought this is insanity. But it is insanity because these people, the Crown represents the liberal elites here in Ottawa, and they want these people in jail because they dared to stare them down and they dared to get the rules changed. And I think they saved lives. I believe they saved lives because they took the mandate pressure down. They alleviated the pressure to force people to get the vaccine. They alleviated the pressure on the lockdowns. But ultimately they won in terms of, at least in the short term, they got these mandates reduced and finally removed, and they stopped the lockdowns. And I don't know how many people decided that, hey, maybe I won't get the vaccine because now I don't
Mm.
really have to. Because I got the vaccine twice because I convinced myself I had to because I was working in Parliament Hill as a journalist. Couldn't get in the door without it. My mother was in a nursing home. I couldn't get in that door without it. And I needed to travel. So I said, well, I really did trust the government insofar as, well, they don't really want to hurt me. And
Hmm.
this has got to be safe. So that's why, I rarely miss a day of this trial. And I go there and actively support these two because I think they have been completely unfairly dealt with by the judicial system, by the political system in Canada. And I hold them up as Canadian heroes. And I was there for them again today, and I'm going to be there for them again tomorrow. And whenever they decide they're going to sentence these people, I'm hoping and praying. And well, offline, you mentioned and even you're a Christian conservative, so am I. I'm hoping and praying that the full weight of the justice system does not come down on their heads because these are good people.
It's absolutely insane because on one hand you have an Indian permanent resident that was just caught trying to have sex with a 15-year-old. Turned out it was a police officer. went to court. The judge is like, "Oh, we're gonna let him go because that could affect his citizenship application." Then you turn around, you have Tamara Lich and Chris Barber that took care of one of the biggest protests, peaceful protests in Canada, and I was there. I made sure to go because I knew the mainstream media would spin this in a way that would make no sense, just like they did. So I made sure my now wife and my two best friends, we drove from Montreal to Ottawa. We made sure to go. And now they're looking at 7 and 8 years for mischief. Yet most of the mischief cases in Canada, they get 2 years max, and most of them are just fines. And you're gonna get some little work, like 50 hours of communal work somewhere, and that's it. They're looking at 7 to 8 years on a maximum of 10 years. So they're smart. They're not after the maximum. They're going very close to it. But at the same time, it's hard for me to believe that even if they walk, even if it stops and somehow everything's dropped, the process is the punishment. The government is sending a message that if you protest for something that we don't agree with, you'll pay the price. We will use our justice system against you. And that's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they're doing right now. Because it's not a protesting. Let's agree here. The people that live in Ottawa, that live downtown, I used to live in Ottawa. If you live right across the parliament, expect to have protests. You have Free Palestine protests literally weekly. They don't complain about that. But people that were trying to end the lockdowns, they're criminals. You got to be kidding me. It's a message. The message is very, very clear. If you dare stand up to the government, they're going to make you. They're going to make you pay. That's all we're seeing with Barber and Lich, and it's bullshit. I don't know how else to say it. It's just bullshit.
You use that phrase, the process is the punishment. And both Tamara and Chris have said that to me on many occasions. I've interviewed them many times on my station. And that's exactly what they've said. It's been 2 years of hell, of expenses, of going through this horrible process. And yes, there's a chilling effect on anybody who wants to oppose the government, because do you really want to go through this? Do you want to
100%.
risk losing your job? Yeah. I'll tell you the kicker today, Nico, which was amazing to me. And I'm glad we went back in the afternoon, because I was thinking, well, I'd rather get home and work on my broadcast. I got an article to finish for Human Events, and I said, no, okay, we'll stay. And that's when I heard the best line of the day. And you're gonna find it's hard to believe, but Magus, who is Chris Barber's lawyer, was arguing passionately about Canadians see this man as a hero. Why are we punishing him for being a hero? Why are we considering 8 years in jail for what he did? And he said he's already endured such financial hardship. And the judge says, like what? What are you talking about? And she said, well, if he's convicted and he has a criminal offense, he's going to lose 60% of his business, because 60% is in the U.S. and he's not going to be able to travel to the U.S. for quite a while. She said, well, that's hypothetical. So she said, well, he's already been paid. Did you know? She said he had his bank accounts frozen. And the judge said, really? Now, this is a judge in a provincial court. She was apparently completely unaware that the Trudeau government froze bank accounts of all of the protesters, especially those who were participating, and even those who donated. And then she said, who ordered that? So I spoke under my breath. I said her name was Chrystia Freeland. I wasn't too far. I was three rows back, right behind Tamara Lich, and she turns to me and says, I said, not that. So there was amazement from a lot of people sitting in that courtroom that this judge was apparently just not aware of it. So I don't know where she was in 2022 when this was going on, because this has been one of the most talked about events in Canadian history in the last decade. This was a complete abrogation of basic human rights in this country, taking away your money. You can't. And I was amazed that this judge wasn't aware of it. I really was amazed. But I'll tell you one other thing. I think this could be a nice segue into your next segment, which I'm sort of envisioning. Pierre Poilievre on the weekend
Uh-oh.
finally said,
Finally.
it's outrageous that the Crown is
Uh,
considering putting these people in jail for 7 or 8 years. And Chris Barber responded and said, "Thank you very much, Pierre. It's much appreciated. We've been waiting a long time for a politician to lend his support." And Pierre Poilievre has said absolutely nothing about this case up to this point. I remember I was at the Freedom Convoy covering it for Human Events at the time, and I remember Pierre Poilievre walking across the street from Parliament Hill, bringing these guys coffee. But of course, he was running for the Conservative leadership at that time,
mhm.
and he needed that grassroots support desperately. And the Conservative grassroots were definitely backing the Freedom Convoy. So I thought, well, I hope that Pierre did that out of the goodness of his heart and of his principles. But he didn't say much after didn't say much after that. And he said nothing until the weekend, about this trial that's gone on for almost 2 years. So, that I found that to be bittersweet. I'll put it that way, because it's about time he got involved. It's good thing, good what he said, and it's nice to see some Conservative MPs also talk out about this. But it should have happened a long time ago.
You're a lot more forgiven than I am, because this is something I absolutely despise about Pierre Poilievre, is his lack of backbone. Because this is a 90-10 issue. He could have beat that drum for the past 2 years and 3 years. He wouldn't have only gained more support. He wouldn't have lost any support. The people that don't like Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, they will never vote for Pierre Poilievre no matter what. So you're not losing anything. You're just reaffirming to your base that you have the balls to stand up for the people that vote for you, for the people that deserve politicians to stand up for them. And unfortunately, this was too little too late. But his whole platform is too little too late, if you ask me. But before we actually go there, I wanted to ask you a question, because if I'm not mistaken, Chris Barber is represented by one of the lawyers from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom, right?
Yes.
So
great organization.
Oh, I know. I record with John Carpe, the president, on my other show all the time. Like, he's kind of our expert when it comes to to bills. We reviewed Bill C2 together and a couple of other ones, but all to say that great organization, couldn't agree with you more. And they even proved that the Emergency Act that the federal government put in place, or used, should I say, during those times, during the whoop whoop times, was unconstitutional. So it blows my mind that what's going on right now is still happening. Like, what they're doing to those, I would call them heroes too, because they stood up when nobody else did, and what they started became a worldwide phenomenon. Like, everybody was talking about the Freedom Convoy. So it's hard for me to believe that judge was not playing dumb. She knew exactly what happened. She's just, is it possible she played dumb, in your opinion? I wasn't in the room, but it's hard for me to believe that the judge, I tend to believe that they're not that dumb, but they will play dumb when it's convenient.
Well, it's hard for me to believe, yes, that she didn't know this, because she's a
Yeah.
very intelligent woman. She's demonstrated that.
Mhm.
Very articulate woman. And I know judges watch the news. I know they stay up on current events. So I found that very, very hard to believe. But it sent shockwaves throughout that courtroom, because whether or not she was kidding or not, it was one heck of a statement to make. And even to feign ignorance, if that's what she was doing, that's incredible, just incredible, because this was a very significant event in the history of Canada, and this should never happen again. But of course, it will happen again if we have people sending Tamara Leach and Chris Barber to jail. It'll happen again, because the lesson here is, don't buck the system. We'll punish you. Even if you don't end up in the slammer, it's going to be 2 years of hell for you.
Like, how many people are looking at that process that they've been through over the past 2 to 3 years and reconsidering any protest that they might be thinking about, right? Because again, the process is the punishment. I don't think they're gonna. I really cannot believe that they will go to jail or they will go to prison. I just don't see it. I don't want to believe that we're there. But what do you think is going to happen if they do? Because there's no way that's going to end up well. That's going to go out well.
No, I don't think there's going to be mass protests in the street. I know there won't be mass protests. I'm certainly not going to encourage them either, but I don't think there's going to be any sort of chemical reaction with Canadians where they say, this enough is enough. We've got to stop this. This is outrageous. We're taking to the streets. No, it's not going to happen. And I think that's largely because this process has defeated that. And it's very unfortunate. But I do think we need another freedom convoy to some degree to shake this country up, because we're under Mark Carney, we are headed towards economic catastrophe. And I had to laugh. I just finished my show because I used to do it early, but I had to do it late today because I had to run out to the courtroom and we just got back. But in addition to featuring the events of the courtroom today, I featured one of the most nauseating speeches I've ever heard from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, when he basically got on his knees in obeisance in an anthem of sycophantic appeal to Mark Carney as being a humble man, an honest man, somebody you can give the keys to. So I joked. I said, Doug, he's already put his hand in your pocket and taken the keys, but you're too stupid to realize that. This is not an honest man. This is not. He thinks he doesn't need this. He wants this because it's all about power for people like Mark Carney. No, maybe he doesn't need another $100 million, but he loves the power, and he does want to take this country down. And it amazes me. He's getting the accolades he still continues to get, when this is a guy who's outspent Justin Trudeau in just a couple of months, $300 billion deficit. If you remember in December, Nico, Christian Freeland was actually very worried about going over the fiscal cliff with $50 billion. It's 6 times that now. And Mark Carney doesn't want a budget, a real budget. He wants what they call an operating budget. In other words, a phony budget. So here's what we're telling you we're spending. We're not going to tell you what we're actually spending. And we were headed for disaster under Justin Trudeau. It's going to be accelerated under Mark Carney, because this guy has no clothes. The emperor has no clothes. He has no credibility, but he has managed to use his experience as the governor of the Bank of England, governor of the Bank of Canada, UN goodwill ambassador for climate change, and all of these other green energy projects he's had, to sell himself as a competent man. And personally, I think he's vastly incompetent. I don't think he is in any position to manage this country, to run this country. And he has not even addressed these conflicts of interest in any way. And he very, very deftly, I'll say this, he's cunning. He's a great politician, but he definitely walked away from that one by saying, well, let's talk about those tariffs. Well, I don't want to talk about the conflicts of interest. Let's talk about the tariffs, and let's have a meeting in Halliburton, and Doug Ford and I can sit by the fire. It's going to be a wonderful time. But let's not talk about those conflicts of interest, because the more you look at Mark Carney's conflicts of interest, the more you realize this guy is networked with all of the evil people in the world, the ones who control the way the world is going. He is in the pocket of all of these people, and he doesn't want to talk about that. But the mainstream media in Canada doesn't want to talk about it either. And the idiots that voted Liberal in the last election just want to live in delusion and ignore it all.
I think where you and I will disagree is that I think Mark Carney is a brilliant man, evilly brilliant. Like, he is evil but he is brilliant. If you read his book, Values, I
Mhm.
read the
Mhm.
book, and he is, if you don't understand history, if you don't understand, I call him Marx Carney because he's a Marxist. Like, he referred to Karl Marx, I think 49 times in his book.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind he's a Marxist. If you read his book and you see what he does, it makes sense because he says it in his book that he wants to put feelings and climate change and anything that can be manipulated through emotion at the center of economic policies. So it's
Yeah.
actually brilliant what he wants to do, but you understand how evil he is. And then you look at his policies, you're like, okay, I understand why he doesn't want to make a deal with the US. He's doing everything possible to look to his overlords in the EU. Obviously, that's where his interest lays. But you know something I always say, Carney's here to finish what Trudeau started. He was his economic advisor behind closed doors for at least 3 years. Like, since 2021, I think, is when CBC first reported about it, that Mark Carney
Mhm.
was advising Trudeau. So it's nothing new what he's doing, but it baffles me that the elbows up movement is still working and they're still standing by him. Because what has he done? What has he done? Nothing. Absolutely
Nothing.
nothing
No.
except ruin our friendship with our biggest ally, the US south of the border. It's absolutely insane. But at the same time, this is what was the whole point of you and I having a conversation. And let's see if this continues after this. But the whole point is, as much as we can blame the liberals for what's going on for 10 years of terrible, terrible policies, the conservatives play a big role in this. Like, and by conservative, I'm talking the big C, the Conservative Party of Canada. Like, they've lost 4 elections in a row. We have a leader. They have a leader right now that doesn't stand up for anything unless it's too late, and it looks like it's been ran through focus group upon focus group to make sure that we're going to offend the least amount of people possible. What do you think we can do? Because I personally, I don't see Pierre Poilievre being the leader that the conservative need or want or deserve. They deserve somebody that will stand up. But what do you think, from your perspective? What do you see happening with the Conservative Party over the next 3.5 years?
Well, it's the frightening thing is, and I just want to preface this by saying I don't really disagree with you on Mark Carney being highly intelligent. I say incompetent in terms of
Oh,
being somebody who can actually deliver the goods, but he doesn't really want to deliver the goods. So I really wouldn't
that's
disagree with
where
that.
we
He,
agree that that's what it is. He's just like that judge you talked about. He
yeah,
fully knows what he's doing, but he's going to make it look like it's out of his control, that it's just happening because of outside forces. But he knows exactly
yeah,
what he's
yeah.
doing. We
In
agree there.
terms of in terms of the Conservative Party of Canada, I mean they continue to make the same mistakes,
Mhm.
and they continue to move to the left after every election, and they're doing that right now. And,
Mhm.
the frightening thing, though, is that Pierre Poilievre is probably the best thing they have in their caucus in terms in terms of being even a facsimile of a conservative, and at least knowing how to talk like a conservative. At the Stampede, for instance, I commented on the fact that it was the first time he dug up some of the rhetoric he used in that very famous Rex Murphy interview, which very much impressed me at the time. Because what did he say? Rex Murphy said, "What kind of government do you imagine yourself leading?" And he said, "I imagine a government that minds its own business, a mind your own business government that lets parents be parents, let parents raise their children." And of course, yeah, and I thought, thank God he seems to understand what this movement is all about. That there's more to this than just saying, well, you're going to own a home and you're going to be on a safe street and you're going to be happy, happy, happy. There's got to be more than this. But so he said those words again at the Stampede to a safe crowd. Obviously, this is a very strong grassroots conservative crowd, and he said it, and I think it was very strategic. He needed to say that because he needs to shore up his support with the grassroots because his leadership is under review and to some degree attack. But I'm not sure how much he really believes it because he didn't say it at all.
Mm.
during the campaign, the election campaign. And to some extent, and I have to tell you, I worked with those people on Parliament Hill. I know the communications department of the Conservative Party. I know Jenny Byrne. I know these people. And I know Pierre Poilievre is often captive to them when he says what they want him to say. But I also think Pierre Poilievre missed an opportunity during this election to stand up for principled conservatism. Just like, as you said, he could have been talking about Tamara Leach and Chris Barber for 2 years. He could have been talking about a lot of things for 2 years. He could have been talking about Canada selling out to the World Health Organization. He said nothing about that. In fact, he muzzles the MPs in his caucus who want to talk about that. I'm thinking of Leslyn Lewis. When she came out against the World Health Organization treaty, Pierre Poilievre muzzled her because I tried to interview her on a number of occasions and I was told, I'm sorry, Leslyn's not talking to the media right now. I said, how about friendly media? No, not those either. I said, well, and having worked with the Stephen Harper people, I said, here we go again. This is the same style of leadership. This is the prime minister's office or the leader or the official opposition leader's office controlling every MP in your caucus, not allowing them to say anything, especially about issues that really resonate with the conservatives. And this World Health Organization treaty, for instance, is a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Poilievre said nothing about it because I don't know. Is he secretly waiting to be invited to the next Bilderberger conference or to the Bohemian Grove, which I understand he hasn't been invited to yet. But I had a guy on my show on the weekend. He said as soon as he's invited to go to the next Bilderberger conference, he's ready to be prime minister. That's what happened to Stephen Harper.
It's bad because Chrystia Freeland and our Minister of Finance were at the last one 3 weeks ago. They both were invited, and one of the topics was migration and depopulation. And this is available. You can go on their website and they actually show the topics that they'll talk about. But yeah, it's hard. There's a couple of comments that came up that are saying that Pierre Poilievre is controlled opposition, and I tend to agree. I don't see what else he could be than just give the illusion that there's no uniparty right now in Canada. Because Mark Carney literally took some of his policies like axe the tax, changed the colors of the background from blue to red, and the liberals went crazy. You know that you're liberal when the liberal can steal your policies without changing anything, just changing the font and the color on it, and somehow it's a liberal policy. So I don't know. I don't know that Pierre Poilievre is the best thing they have because again, I know a lot of people behind the scene that were part of his campaign, and they've all told me the same thing, that as you mentioned, they were told to keep quiet, that not to destroy his lead, to make sure that they didn't say anything that could jeopardize the lead. Yet we all saw what happened. Him being captive of his party, your leader. If you can't control your people, you're not that great of a leader. But what blows my mind the most is that his supporters are still defending him like he's the savior of Canada. And he doesn't stand up for anything. It blows my mind. It blows my mind the state of affairs in which we are. And I don't understand how people from the left are still supporting Carney. And I don't understand how people of the left are still supporting Pierre Poilievre. I just don't get it. I spend half of my time in the US and I'm like, am I living in a Twilight Zone episode here? Am I like, I feel like the crazy person on the corner street with my sign just saying, hey guys, wake up. Like they're the same. There's no difference. We need somebody that's a real conservative, but I don't see it. I don't see who's out there right now that could take the place of what Pierre Poilievre should be.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. I can't think of anybody in the front benches anyway of the Conservative caucus who's who would do a better job, and that's a frightening thing. But I think Poilievre probably did the worst job he's ever done as official opposition leader, in that when they all went back to school for 3 weeks, when the House resumed very, very briefly, and Poilievre was co-opted every day. And I talked to my American friends, the American journalists I work with, and I said they cannot believe that the prime minister would reconvene the House for like literally 3 weeks and then send them all home for 3 months. I said, this is incredible. Congress doesn't do that. Congress is meeting right now, and they will be meeting in August. They don't get 3 months off vacation time. But when Poilievre was there for that 3 weeks, I did a number of shows, and I got hit bad for it with my subscribers and with the viewers I was getting, because I said Poilievre has been co-opted here. There's no question about it. And he's literally saying it. He's saying, isn't it neat the way Mark Carney plagiarized my policies? And I up to then I had said, well, Mark Carney might say the same words, but Mark Carney doesn't believe in those words the same way you do, Pierre Poilievre. When Poilievre said that, I said, well, maybe I'm completely wrong here. Maybe the two of them really are talking the same language. Maybe when they talk about safe streets, they're talking about the same thing. But it really upset me the way Poilievre voted for Bill C-5, supported it 100%, and had the audacity to send its people out there and say, oh, it's okay, we fixed it. We got rid of all the bad stuff. And I got hit with this all the time. Every time I criticized Bill C-5, I'd have people in my comment section say, the conservatives fixed that bill. Don't you know anything? And I was saying, no, I'm sorry, they didn't. Everything I've read about that bill indicates it was not fixed in any degree. This is a dangerous bill. Poilievre also seemed completely embarrassed by talking about Bill C-2, which is a horrendous bill.
Yep.
And this is as bad as anything Justin Trudeau introduced.
Worse.
So once again, Pierre Poilievre was very reluctant to attack the Online Harms Act, Bill C-36 under Trudeau. I can count the number of times he came out strongly against that bill on one hand. And it was always in strong conservative environments, such as conferences where he's talking to the converted, or when he's talking to the caucus, when he's talking to a very, very strong grassroots conservative element. But he was very reluctant to talk about that bill in the House of Commons. Never wanted to talk about that. And as far as I was concerned, that was the most dangerous piece of legislation Trudeau government introduced in over 9 years. And Mark Carney, of course, will be back with it. So can we trust Pierre Poilievre to come out strongly against it this time? Or are they going to say, well, it's all about protecting children? And even when they talked about dividing the bill, so they can introduce this redundant protection of children element, which is we already have in the criminal code. There's no reason to replicate the legislation in another bill. The point is, if you do that, you're getting pushed farther from embracing the whole package. And that's what worried me, because I did not see the passionate opposition to that bill. And I saw very little passionate opposition to Bill C-2. And it struck me as odd that the only MP really who took that on was Michelle Rempel-Garner, who really doesn't have strong conservative bona fides. And I've known Michelle for many years. We haven't talked in many years because she got pissed off at me when I criticized her over the transgender issue, and she hasn't really talked to me since. But I used to be fairly close to Michelle Rempel-Garner, and I had a lot of time for her as a strong worker but she's never really had strong conservative bona fides. So why was she being pushed out there to talk about Bill C-2? Because nobody else wants to talk about it.
And I did 2 deep dives with John Carpe we did one on Bill C-2, one on Bill C-5. Bill C-5, the conservative did remove a lot of the bad stuff, but the bill is useless. Without removing Bill C-69, Bill C-5 doesn't move the needle at all, at all, at all whatsoever. This is a feel-good bill. It does not move the needle whatsoever, but Bill C-2 is one scary piece of legislation. We've been through this, and we did it with, like, we did 2 deep dives with John Carpe, and it's insane. When you read the 140 pages, you're just like, whoa, hold on. They're trying to give the same type of power. So they're trying to push paper pushers at the government, so government workers, to be able to obtain warrant from judges. So not only police officers now, they want government workers to be able to apply for warrants. They want to be able to spy on people. They want to be able to open the mail without a warrant. They want to be able to maximize. You won't be able to spend more than 10 grand cash. Like, what they want to do is absolutely insane, and it blows my mind that this is a bill that I'm not even sure Pierre Poilievre talked about it. If he did, he didn't really talk about it. And I got to say, I haven't heard anybody from the Conservative Party as a whole really destroy that bill or go through that bill the way my co-host and I did with John Carpe. And it's insane to me, because that bill is like the hate speech bill. Differently, it's more in the real world. It's not online. It's more what can be done physically to you. But you're absolutely right. It's going to come back. That bill, that Justin Trudeau bill that died because the parliament was prorogued from December 17th to mid-March for 5 months. That's the only reason that bill died, right? But it's coming back. Yeah. No questions about it. But I don't understand why conservatives as a whole are not more outspoken about this. And it's not just Pierre Poilievre. I personally know multiple guys that ran for the Conservatives, and they're still not vocal about it. They speak about symptoms, not the actual problems. And I don't understand what the big deal is. Again, it's a 90-10 issue. They have nothing to lose to talk about Bill C-2 and say how dangerous that bill is. On the contrary, they're going to make fans, or they're going to make new voters of people that weren't aware of Bill C-2 or did not take the time, like any average individual out there. All the laymen did not read 140 page of that bill. They don't want to, and I don't blame them. It's boring to read. But at the same time, it's their job, and I don't understand what they're doing unless, again, it's controlled opposition. This is the part. If I'm an engineer by trade, right? I used to sell goals to customers. What's your goal? We'll deconstruct it, we'll reverse engineer it, and we'll get it there. That's the goal. That's the solution I'm going to sell you. And I look at Pierre Poilievre and I analyze the way he speaks, the way he behaves, what he seems to be trying to accomplish. And it doesn't seem like he wants to be elected. It doesn't seem like he wants a Conservative Party in power. He doesn't seem like he wants to stop what's going on right now. So what is he? Controlled opposition? I can't see anything else coming from that guy outside of just being there to appear to keep up the illusion of choice.
Yeah, I've known Pierre Poilievre for over 20 years. I don't pretend he's like one of my best friends who comes over on the weekends, but I first met Pierre Poilievre the night Stephen Harper was elected leader of the Canadian Alliance Party in Calgary, and I met him at a pub. It was a Victory pub party after the votes were counted, and Stephen Harper was claimed the leader of the Canadian Alliance. This is before, of course, he became the leader of the new Conservative Party. But Pierre Poilievre at that time was a volunteer at a local campaign. Actually, he was working for Ezra Levant. I can tell you that much. And he struck me as somebody who had a lot of ambition. And I sort of, our paths crossed over the years because I worked in Parliament Hill for Conservative MPs, starting out with Reform Party, Canadian Alliance, then Conservative MPs. Finally had enough of it. I couldn't stand it anymore, and had to get out. But our paths crossed over the years, and he was never liked by the media, any of the media. He never was liked, and he was able to use that as a plus since becoming official opposition leader. He's been able to use that antipathy the media has for him as a plus. Although it's rooted more in personality than it is in politics. The mainstream media doesn't like him because of his personality. It's really not because they hate his policies that much. It's because they don't like him, and that's really been there's always been a collision course there. But he's always struck me as somebody who is very intelligent and very very cunning, politically cunning, which is something you need as well as intelligence to succeed in politics. You have to know how to use the system and to make that system work for you. And he's very good at that. So I do believe Pierre Poilievre wants to be prime minister. I don't know what kind of prime minister he wants to be. The evidence for me is still undecided. I hope that the Poilievre who talks about the government that minds its own business is the real Pierre Poilievre, but I certainly have my doubts about that on many days. But I think it must have been hard. I'll say this in his favor. It must have been tremendously hard to be 25 points ahead of the Liberals, and he could taste government. He could see himself as prime minister in waiting. He knew he was on the precipice of power, and to see that erode week after week, day after day, it must have been hard. And if there's anything I could say about Pierre Poilievre that's definitely in his favor, I think he weathered that storm not too badly, because I think a lot of people would have absolutely collapsed. And he was able, I don't know how he did it, because I tried to speak to Pierre Poilievre numerous times during the election campaign. His people kept saying, no, he's not talking to you. Maybe next week, maybe next week. And I didn't bother to sort of buttonhole him at events. So I don't know how he dealt with it, but I think he dealt with it in a way that was somewhat admirable. He got through it. But I think on the flip side of that, he has continuously talked about the fact that it was the best showing the Conservative Party has had since Brian Mulroney, uh, in terms of percentage of the vote. That second place, it was a great second place finish, and he seems to be sort of locked into that mindset that he was in the night he lost that election and lost his own seat, which again must have been incredibly hard for him. This is a man who does have a significant ego and who politically sees himself as a winner. And it must have been hard for him. And I think he's gotten through it, at least in public. God knows what's happening to him in private. But publicly, I think he's done not too badly getting through this situation. But I think the real challenges for him are are ahead, because this is going to be one difficult, and I'm sure it is already a difficult by-election for him, because every doorstep he goes on, the question is going to be, why shouldn't Alberta be independent? Why shouldn't Alberta separate? What is left for this province in confederation? And he's got to ask that question every day. So I think that must be extremely hard for him. Okay, I'm not hearing you. Have you got your mic muted? Yeah, I'm not hearing you. I'm still not hearing you. That's really bizarre. Are you hearing me? Can your mic? Your mic is indicated. Okay.
Can you hear me now? Yes? No? Can you
Okay,
hear
I
me?
can hear you.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah, can hear you now.
Ah, boy. Headphones, there you go. I think I can hear you now. Can you speak for a second?
Yeah, yeah. You're
Still
coming
can't hear
through.
you.
You're coming through right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can. Windows update. Yeah. Audience pattern. So they can hear me now. Can you speak for me, David?
Yes, I am. I'm
I
hearing you.
cannot hear you now.
You now you can't hear
We
me.
can hear you, but no, you can't hear me. Oh, that's great. So people can hear
No, I can hear
me, but
you.
I
I can hear
can't
you
hear
fine.
you. You can hear me
Oh,
too, and I just cannot hear you for some reason. Can you speak again? See?
okay. Am I coming
Oh,
through at all here?
Jesus.
We were fine.
This makes zero sense. Give me a second.
Mm. Oh.
Now, can you guys hear me? So people can hear me. Then, can you guys hear David? Because I cannot hear him. That is.
Am I coming through, folks?
Yes, now I can
And
hear you. There we go. Awesome. Yes, it
okay.
probably is a Windows update. Nothing like a nice Windows update. So all to say, if we go back to what we were saying, it's hard for me not to blame Pierre Poilievre for his own failures because he doesn't have anybody else to blame than himself. You can blame Trump all you want, you can blame Carney all you want, but he should have learned from what Trump did. However you feel about Trump, Trump got Biden changed at the last second for Kamala Harris, the most woke president possibility that could have ever happened, but he adapted. He went on podcasts like Joe Rogan and he actually spoke to the young voters. Mark Carney got the same opportunity. They switched. He was good against Trudeau. They brought in Carney as in the replacement, as somebody that's completely different. But Pierre Poilievre did not adapt, did not pivot, just let it happen, let him steal his policies, and refused to go on podcasts, refused to go on platforms where he could have put his voice out there, because we all know that CBC is going to rip into him every single time they get, every chance they get, right? It is the propaganda arm of the Liberal Party. And but he didn't take advantage. Like, he was invited on Joe Rogan, he was invited on PBD, he was invited on Tucker Carlson. And if you look at studies, something like 25% to 30% of people listen to at least one podcast a month. That could have been it. He could have had platforms where they would have allowed him to speak whatever he wanted. You know that those platforms wouldn't have censored him. But why do you think he didn't do it? I personally think he just doesn't have it in him. He's not able to go off script. He's not able to improvise. He's scared to say something. You know, before we started recording, you told me that you'll never say something that you don't want to say. So you know when to say things and when not to say things. And I think that's something that Pierre Poilievre does not have, that it needs to be in a controlled environment, because going off script is not going to work for him.
Yeah, for me, it's like it's a question, as I've alluded to previously as to how much of this problem is Pierre Poilievre and how much of it is the communication staffers around him who are convincing him. But I guess I guess we can say, just as you have just said, that that's his problem too. He needs to assert himself
Mhm.
and say, "I'm not listening to you," because clearly he was getting bad advice. Yes, I heard. I don't know how many stories I heard about the opportunities that were dropped in his lap to reach millions of people on podcasts like Patrick Bet-David and
Mhm.
possibly even Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and he ran from them all. And I think that was probably the worst mistake he made during the election campaign because he had nothing to lose.
No.
And instead of saying the polling is all wrong, and it was like conservative supporters were saying the same thing through the whole campaign. The polling is all wrong. It's skewed. Just ignore it. And it can't be wrong week after week after week. And obviously, Pierre Poilievre should have tried something a little bit different. But as you say, he was in the same position as Donald Trump because,
Mhm.
I mean, Joe Biden was certainly a paper tiger. He was a straw man. And Trump knew he was going to steamroll Joe Biden. Bring on Kamala Harris, and suddenly you've got a woman, you've got someone a lot younger, at least is capable of putting a sentence together, even if it's a word salad. At least she can put a sentence together, and she knows how to get off the stage without being led around. So, but Trump reacted to that by what? Not by saying I'm going to go hibernate.
No.
He went on, as you said, he went on podcast after podcast and sold this and sold himself just like he did in 2016. And that's what Pierre Poilievre missed. And I don't know how many people I talked to saying he needs to do this. He needs to do this. But if and I know the communications people were telling him you can't go on those shows, Pierre, because people will think you're extreme. People will think you're part of that alt-right group.
Mhm.
People will think you're not safe enough for Canada. That's the advice they were giving him. I've heard it. I've been in the room when those people have given advice like that. But Poilievre needed to say no. And I think he has enough gumption to find that courage. But he clearly did not find that courage enough. There were a couple of times in the campaign trail where we saw the Pierre Poilievre of the axe to tax uh, movement, if you will. And I went to several of those, and I've never seen Poilievre perform better. And there were times when he actually was sounding like Ronald Reagan, talking about this Canada that sounded free. That was completely absent from the campaign. That sort of talk. And when you're constantly reading the talking points about safe streets and safe communities, lock up the car thieves, um, the same talking points, and they incrementally sort of release this policy plank, which was really not any different than they'd been talking about for the previous 12 months. The only difference was Poilievre's appeal to true conservatism was lacking far too many times during the campaign. And I, you asked me what I think the remedy is. I'm sorry to say this. I think the only remedy is Alberta separating. I think
I
that's the
agree.
only thing that's going to shake this country up. Because I've lost faith in the country. I really have. And I don't think we're going to survive Mark Carney. And I don't think the Conservatives are going to package anybody up to
No.
replace him in time. And I think the only thing that's going to make this country wake up to how devastating the last 10 years have been and where we're headed is an independent Alberta. I think that's the only thing that's really going to shake this country up. I'm not sure anything else will work at this point, which is why I say I think Poilievre made a horrible mistake running in Alberta, political mistake. I think he probably should have twisted some arms in my neck of the woods in the Ottawa Valley, where there were at least 2 MPs who probably could have convinced it was time to step down, at least temporarily. And he could have run in those seats easily. And he would not have been confronted with question after question about the Alberta independence and separation. And I really believe after 21 years of being an Ontario MP, it's almost laughable the way Pierre Poilievre has tried to repackage himself as a lifelong Albertan who is so attuned to the folks in Calgary in southern Alberta that it just hurts. But he has been an Ontario MP for so long that I really think that's his more natural milieu. And I think he's much more comfortable dealing with that kind of voter than he is with the one he's meeting in Battle River Crowfoot, which is a very true blue conservative riding. Sure, it's a safe one, but it's a double-edged sword for Pierre Poilievre because it's going to be a heck of an experience for him, not just because of the 200 people on the ballot. It's going to be a very hard experience because he's going to be challenged every day by grassroots conservatives who might not trust him in the same way that Ontario conservatives do.
You know, at the Stampede, he looked like Woody from Toy Story with his little star on the horse. When I saw that, I'm like, oh, bro, come on. You're not a cowboy. Just be yourself. I don't know what's so hard for a politician not to play dress up. Just be who you are. Just say what you got to say. But man, did he overplay it in Alberta? And you're right. He's going to get destroyed by the regular people because at the end of the day, he's not an Albertan. He doesn't represent Crow River. He doesn't represent Battleford?
Battle River Crowfoot.
There you go. Dang. But he doesn't represent that riding whatsoever. He's not from there. He doesn't talk to them directly. He's only been given that riding because it's an easy win. But at the same time, I wonder if the numbers are going to go down. If people are not going to vote for him knowing that he'll never be there. He just wants that to go back to Ottawa and be the leader of the Conservative Party again. He has no intentions of fighting for those people directly. But at the same time, we have a couple minutes to go. And, you know, I talk about this every single day. I follow Pierre Poilievre on his social media to make sure I'm aware of what he's talking about. And I still don't see it. Even for October, it's August 18th is the by-election. I still don't see it. I still don't see any difference between the Pierre Poilievre from the campaign and now. Sure, he started his podcast where he's repeating the same stuff that he said before, but he's not hammering anything down as in choose 5 topics like 10 years of bad policy, bad GDP, LGBTQ problem, leave the kids alone with your trans agenda. Like, he doesn't hammer those, or keep men out of women's sports. Like, he doesn't hammer those strong problem that every person with common sense, even liberals. I have friends of mine that are liberals, and they voted for Pierre Poilievre because they couldn't condone another liberal party for what they've done for the past 10 years. But do you see any difference from what he's doing right now compared to what he did during the campaign? Because I don't see it.
Like I said, I thought he was beginning to hit his stride at the Stampede. And I said, I hope this is the Poilievre we see from this point forward. Then he did some very bizarre interviews. One was CBC. And the reporter was very, very combative with him. But it was almost like you could see a mask on the man, that he was masquerading as the more moderate Pierre Poilievre. Yeah. And if you want the other Pierre Poilievre who wants the government to mind its own business, well, just watch that video clip from the Stampede. If you want the more moderate Pierre Poilievre, here I am talking to CBC, but I thought, what in the hell are you talking to CBC for? When they always want to crucify you. You can't be left-wing enough for them. You can't be moderate enough for them. You can't appease them. You can't satisfy them. You're still not talking to the podcasters. And they're the ones who are going to save your political skin. If you want to stay leader of the Conservative Party, you got to move to the right. You know, Richard Nixon famously said, in a primary, you run to the right. In the election, you run to the center. Well, that might not be great advice for conservatives, but Pierre Poilievre's not even taking that advice. He's staying in the center, talking to CBC and the mainstream media, ignoring the podcasters, ignoring the issues you were talking about. And I think he's putting himself in a highly dangerous and toxic position because, as I keep pointing out to people, he's not running for prime minister right now. We're not going to have an election in the next 6 months. There's no way. Mark Carney's here for a little while. Maybe not 4 or 5 years, maybe not even 2. But he's here for at least a year. Pierre Poilievre is running to be Conservative Party leader of Canada again, because he's got a leadership review coming up in the new year. That's what he should be focused on, is assuring the base of the party that he's really on their side. And he still doesn't seem to get that, because he's still going to CBC and being Mr. Nice Guy. And that's a long way away from the that famous Apple scene where he tore apart that local reporter chawing on his apple. That's probably one of the finest moments he ever had with the grassroots. They love that. That went viral around North America. Republicans love that. They go, "Who is this guy anyway? Who's this Poilievre guy talking down in the media?" But what's he doing today? He's going to CBC and taking abuse. And I'm sorry, that's not what he should be doing right now, because his political life is on the line.
And as you said, I've been saying this for 6 months. Go on every single podcast you can appear on. Doesn't matter. Just go. If they're conservative leaning somewhat, as long as they're not liberal, just go. Who cares? Just answer their question and practice being freestyled. Because I don't believe he has the skills right now to do it, but all the tools are there. It just choose not to pick them up. And he only has one person to blame. It's himself. David, we're just over an hour. I know you wanted to stop at an hour, so we'll stop it right here. We're at 3 minutes after the hour, so we're pretty bang on. Really appreciated this talk. This is just a can opener, if you ask me, because there's a lot of things we can be talking about, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I want to thank everybody in the audience. Thank you for your comments. Agree, disagree. I always want to have a conversation with people. That's all I do for 2 hours a day. So thank you for being here. Thank you, David, for being here. And hopefully we do this again.
I hope so, Nico. I enjoyed it very much. I think this works very well.
Sounds good.